Buongiorno tutti quanti. Oggi si continua la discussione dei nomi presentando le forme di nomi italiani per riconoscere il genere e il numero di questa specie di parole. Se avete evitato la lezione scorsa, vi raccomando di guardarla adesso prima di continuare, perché contiene delle informazioni molto importanti. Per favore aprite il libro a pagina 29. Vediamo il dialogo qui in cima. Dopo ascoltarmi, mettete la video a pausa e leggete il dialogo ad alta voce, con un partner se possibile. Venditore: panini, banane, gelati, vino, caffè, aranciata, birra. Turista americana: 2 panini e una birra, per favore. Venditore: ecco signorina, 9 euro. Turista americana: ecco 9 dollari, va bene? As we jump into real grammar for the first time, I want to offer the caveat up front that there are always exceptions in grammar. So most of this course is going to deal with typical cases. Typical Italian nouns can end in o, a, e, or e. In Lesson 8, we talked about how nouns can be singular or plural. One of the ways you can tell if a noun is singular or plural is by which of these vowels is at the end of the word you're looking at. Singular nouns end in o, a, or e. Plural nouns end in e or e. So if you have a noun that ends in o or a, that noun is going to be singular 95% of the time. If you have a noun that ends in e, that noun is going to be plural 95% of the time. So the only nouns that are a real challenge are the ones that end in a, because those ones can be either singular or plural. In that case, you have two options. If you know the word, you'll be able to tell right away just using the information in this lesson. If you don't know the word, you can use context to determine what makes more sense. So let's pull some examples from the dialogue to identify which nouns are singular and which are plural. Gelati, aranciata, panini, banane, vino, dollari, euro. If you'd like to test yourself more on singular and plural, you can draw on the vocabulary you've already learned, such as the objects in the classroom in the capitolo preliminare or the vocabolario preliminare in Lesson 7. Let's move on to gender. For the purpose of this discussion, I'd like to introduce the terms signifier and signified. A signifier is a word, any word, and the signified is the thing the word means. For example, this is the signifier. This is the signified. So the signified is something that exists, and the signifier is the name we give that thing. I know this seems a little abstract, but I think they make it easier to communicate a couple of the points I need to make about noun gender. Anyway, Italian has masculine and feminine nouns. That means that in Italian, all things are either he or she, not it. That's the meaning of masculine and feminine in this context. Just like we'd refer to a father as he and a mare as she, Italian puts all nouns into one of these categories. So in English, we'd refer to a mirror and a chair as it. In Italian, a mirror is he and a chair is she. There's no property of the signified that determines whether the signifier is masculine or feminine. That is, there's nothing about a mirror that makes it more male-like than a chair. The only exception to this is if the signified has natural gender. So a lioness is feminine, a widower is masculine, and so on. You might be wondering why noun gender matters when it doesn't reflect anything meaningful about the signified. The reason it's important to you is that noun gender affects how you'll use articles, adjectives, and some verb forms, which are really important and we'll introduce in upcoming lessons. The point I want to hammer in here before anything is that noun gender is arbitrary, yet it's imperative that you use the correct one for each noun you use. Lots of people ask why a noun is one or the other gender, and asking why is a pointless exercise because it just is that way. There's no real reason for it. So how do you know what gender a noun is? The answer is that you use the same ending vowels, o, a, e, and e, that we use to determine the number of the nouns. Let's start with masculine nouns. Nomi maschili. In almost all cases, singular nouns that end with o are masculine. Masculine plural nouns end in e. So one cat is gatto, and two or more cats are gatti. It's just like that. The e replaces the o if you want to make a plural. In almost all cases, singular nouns that end with a are feminine. Nomi femminili. In the plural, this a is replaced with e. So one chair is a sedia, and two or more chairs are sedie. Now, as you might recall, I did say singular nouns can end with a as well. These nouns can be either masculine or feminine, although there are some clues you can get. The most important one is that nouns that end in zione will be feminine always. I can't think of an exception to that. Otherwise, when you learn a new noun that ends with a, you'll just need to look up and memorize the gender. All nouns that end in a, regardless of gender, have plurals that end in e, so feminine nazione turns into nazioni, and masculine venditore turns to venditori. So, to summarize what we've covered up to this point, we said earlier that nouns can end in o, a, e, or e. Nouns that end in o are masculine and singular. Nouns that end in a are feminine and singular. There are a couple different possibilities for nouns that end in a and e. Nouns that end in a give you the least information. They can be masculine or feminine singulars. They can also be feminine plurals of nouns that end in a in the singular. Nouns that end in e are usually masculine plurals of nouns that end in either o or e in the singular. They can also be feminine plurals of feminine nouns that end in e. I see we're coming up on time here, but this lesson is definitely not over. Like I said at the beginning, there are exceptions to everything in grammar. There are some really important exceptions to the rules I just gave you, as well as some special cases that require more information. This is going to take more than a minute and a half, so I'm going to break here and continue this lesson in another video, which will be part 2.